Miami in the late 70s and early 80s wasn't just a tourist paradise. It was a war zone, a city awash in cocaine, money, and blood. And at the heart of that storm, not a cartel kingpin, not a male trafficker, but a woman. They called her La Madrina, the Godmother. This is the story of Griselda Blanco, a woman who rose from the slums of Medellín to become one of the most ruthless and powerful drug lords in history. She didn't just compete with men in a brutal world, she outdid them. She innovated, she terrorized, and she built an empire of powder and death, leaving a trail of bodies that stretched from the streets of New York to the mansions of Miami. But how did a woman in a male-dominated world of violence amass such terrifying power, inspiring both fear and a perverse respect? The answer lies in a life defined by unparalleled ruthlessness, cunning, and an insatiable hunger for control. Imagine a world where violence is currency, and death is just another business expense. Now imagine a woman, standing at the very top of that world, ruling it with an iron fist. Griselda Blanco was not just a drug trafficker, she was a pioneer, a strategic mastermind, and a cold-blooded killer who personally ordered the deaths of untold dozens, possibly hundreds, of rivals, informants, and anyone who dared to cross her. She was a mother, raising her sons in the thick of her brutal empire, even using them as enforcers. While names like Pablo Escobar dominate the legend, Griselda Blanco laid much of the groundwork, carving out the routes, perfecting the methods, and unleashing a level of violence that shocked even the most hardened criminals. She was the queen of cocaine when Miami was a frontier town, and the stakes were life and death. How did she achieve such chilling notoriety, and what was the true cost of her reign? The answers are soaked in blood and betrayal. Griselda Blanco's story began not in the sun-drenched glamour of Miami, but in the brutal poverty of Cartagena, Colombia, in 1943. Her early life was a descent into darkness. By age 11, she was reportedly involved in kidnapping, prostitution, and street crime. Medellín, where she spent much of her youth, was a cauldron of desperation, where survival often meant choosing the path of least resistance, or the most lucrative. Griselda quickly learned that the world was a dog-eat-dog place, and she was determined not to be the dog that got eaten. Her first marriage, to a small-time criminal and forger named Carlos Trujillo, gave her 3 sons and introduced her deeper into the criminal underworld. She learned the ropes, seeing firsthand how petty crime could escalate. But Griselda was restless, ambitious, and saw a bigger game unfolding. She quickly moved on, both geographically and criminally, when she met Alberto Bravo, her second husband. Bravo was involved in small-scale marijuana trafficking, but Griselda, with her keen eye for opportunity and a developing ruthlessness, saw the vast, untapped potential of a new, highly addictive drug beginning to filter into the United States: cocaine. She wasn't content to just follow, she wanted to lead, to carve out her own bloody empire. And she was about to make a move that would set her on a collision course with destiny and unleash a reign of terror unlike anything the world had ever seen. Griselda and Alberto Bravo initially established their operations in New York City in the early 1970s. While other traffickers focused on bulk shipments, Griselda had a brilliant, if utterly audacious, idea. She started designing and manufacturing custom lingerie with hidden compartments, perfect for smuggling cocaine. Her ingenuity quickly made her millions, establishing a lucrative foothold in the burgeoning drug market. She was already defying expectations, a woman not just involved in the trade, but innovating within it. But New York couldn't contain her ambition. The money was flowing, but so was the attention. In 1975, facing indictments, Griselda fled back to Colombia. It was there that her true monstrous potential began to emerge. Suspecting Alberto Bravo of stealing from her, or perhaps simply wanting sole control, Griselda reportedly shot him point blank in a Medellín nightclub, cementing her reputation as a cold-blooded killer who would tolerate no betrayal. With Bravo gone, Griselda returned to the United States, choosing Miami as her new base of operations. This was her moment. She brought with her not just vast sums of money and an established network, but a chilling new level of violence. The Miami drug war was about to explode, and Griselda Blanco was its undisputed detonator. She wasn't just building an empire, she was forging it in fire and fear, and the streets of Miami would never be the same. By the late 1970s and early 80s, Griselda Blanco was the undisputed queen of Miami's cocaine trade. She was running massive shipments, estimated to be up to 300 kilos a month, raking in hundreds of millions of dollars. Her luxury lifestyle was legendary: sprawling mansions, custom-made jewelry, including a diamond-encrusted machine gun pendant, and a penchant for lavish parties. But beneath the glittering facade was a reign of terror. Griselda was notorious for her extreme paranoia and unbridled savagery. She employed a legion of enforcers, including the infamous motorcycle killers, who pioneered drive-by assassinations from motorbikes. Her methods were ruthless. Rivals were eliminated without mercy. Informants were brutally tortured. Anyone who crossed her faced unimaginable consequences. One of her most infamous acts was reportedly ordering the murder of a former enforcer and his 2 young sons, just to send a message. She reveled in violence, reportedly deriving pleasure from witnessing the execution she ordered. She was a shrewd businesswoman, but her business model relied heavily on fear. She even had a 4th son, Michael Corleone Blanco, named after the character in The Godfather, a chilling nod to the dark world she inhabited. At her peak, Griselda controlled a vast network, importing cocaine and orchestrating a level of bloodshed that earned Miami the chilling nickname the murder capital of America. She was an untouchable force, a living legend of brutality. But even queens, especially those who rule by terror, eventually faced their reckoning. And Griselda Blanco's empire, built on mountains of cocaine and oceans of blood, was about to crumble. The endless bloodshed on the streets of Miami eventually became too much to ignore. Law enforcement, particularly the Drug Enforcement Administration, DEA, and local police, launched an all-out war against the drug cartels, with Griselda Blanco as a primary target. She was seen as responsible for an estimated 200 to 250 murders, and her violent reputation made her a priority for capture. The pressure was immense. Griselda, ever paranoid, became increasingly isolated and erratic. Her drug use escalated, fueling her violent tendencies and clouding her judgment. In 1985, after a decade of terrorizing Miami, Griselda Blanco was finally apprehended by the DEA in Irvine, California. She was initially sentenced to a lengthy federal prison term for drug trafficking. However, the authorities desperately wanted to convict her for murder, to hold her accountable for the carnage she unleashed. In 1994, she was charged in Florida with 3 counts of first-degree murder. The case was fraught with complications. Key witnesses were themselves criminals, and one, a former hitman named Jorge Ayala, was embroiled in a sex scandal with 2 secretaries from the prosecutor's office, damaging his credibility. Despite the overwhelming evidence of her involvement in numerous killings, Griselda's legal team managed to navigate the chaos. She eventually pleaded guilty to 3 counts of second-degree murder in 1998, receiving a reduced sentence that allowed her to be released from prison and deported back to Colombia in 2004. It seemed, impossibly, that the cocaine godmother had once again slipped through the ultimate net. But the streets, as they say, have a long memory. For 8 years after her deportation, Griselda Blanco lived a relatively quiet life in Medellín, Colombia, seemingly having escaped the violent fate that claimed so many of her contemporaries, including Pablo Escobar. She became a reclusive figure, a ghost from a brutal past, largely forgotten by the public, though certainly not by her enemies. On September 3, 2012, at the age of 69, Griselda Blanco was leaving a butcher shop in Medellín when a hitman on a motorcycle pulled up and shot her twice in the head. She died instantly. The irony was stark. The woman who pioneered the motorcycle assassination tactic ultimately met her end by the very same method. Griselda Blanco's legacy is a chilling one. She was a true pioneer of the cocaine trade, not just as a woman in a male-dominated world, but as an innovator of smuggling techniques and a progenitor of extreme violence. Her ruthlessness set a new standard, influencing future generations of traffickers, including some who would go on to form the Medellín cartel. She defied every expectation, shattering stereotypes about gender and power in the criminal underworld. But her reign came at an unimaginable cost. Countless lives, shattered communities, and a city scarred by her brutality. The cocaine godmother ruled Miami with an iron fist, only to be undone by the very savagery she unleashed. Her story remains a stark reminder that in the world of organized crime, every empire, no matter how powerful or terrifying, is ultimately built on shifting sand, waiting for the inevitable wave of retribution to bring it crashing down.